In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can create a very simple lighting scenario inside of Maya using Arnold. And we're going to use a 3-point light setup. We're going to be using a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And a key light is going to be our main shadow casting directional light that gives us the most of our illumination. We'll have a fill light or bounce. And what we're going to use for that is image-based lighting. And then we're going to have a backlight, or we're going to have a rim light. And you can see this is this kind of hotter part along the outer edge of these renders that we have, and we're going to be using a point light for that. So let's go ahead and hop into Maya and take a look. So in order to follow along with the content, I want to direct you over to my Gumroad page, and there's two products that I'd like for you to think about getting whenever you're following along with this. So the first is this prototyping pack tools that I have in there, and within there I'm going to basically be using the infinity wall that's within there, and then also I'm going to be pointing you to this place here that's got 3 different models, so you could choose any one of these 3 models and you could download those and then pull those into Maya, and then you could follow along exactly like what I'm doing within inside this tutorial. Okay, here I am inside of Maya, and you can take any one of the 3 different models that I've provided on the Gumroad page and load that up. They're saved as a Maya binary file, so it should be pretty easy for you to just open that directly as a scene, and each one should just have some basic cameras and then the model itself. And it should be tied to a Lambert material, should be placed inside of the world, and all the scale is set for you. And then from there, what I like to do is I'm going to go to Windows, go to General Editors, and then go to Content Browser. And if you download the prototyping pack, you can go ahead and get that and say set project, and then go to where that project was taken from. And then I don't have this quite set up yet, so I'll just go ahead and go do this along with you. So I'll find this prototyping tools area, and I'll just hit set for that, and then this will say where this is going to be at, but I want to kind of save this as a favorite, so if I want to get back to this pretty easily, I'm going to go back one directory like this, and then I'll find this prototyping tools, and then I'll just right click on that and say add to favorites. And when I do that, it should come here, and then I can just, every time I load up this content browser, I can just go to this prototyping tools area, click that, and then that should be really easy for me to grab this. So within the lighting area, I've got a folder, and I can take this infinity wall, click, and I'll drag this into the scene. And so then now I've got an infinity wall, and I can select it, and you can see this is the geometry that was built for it. It's a pretty large piece of geometry, and it's just kind of a bowl shape. It's going to be giving us a very nice gradient no matter where we take a look at within the scene. And so I'm going to take this and just kind of frame it up. After I've got this set, if you've got any problems with it, you might take the infinity wall, just say assign the existing material, make sure the Lambert's on there. I believe it should be, so I think it should actually have a Lambert that is included with it. Now if you select this, and if you take a look over in the layers area, you can actually put this as reference, and then you can just see it and not select it, and that way it won't get in the way. You can turn on and off the visibility of that. So the next part is I'm going to be taking and setting up some lights within here, and so we're going to be rendering with Arnold. So I'm going to go ahead and come in this area and just drag down and go to the rendering area, and this will give access to the Arnold tab that you see here. We're going to set up some lights. Let's go to lights, and we're going to use an area light, and then I'm going to click and drag this out. You can see it's going to throw the area light right over here, and then drag this over here, and then we can rotate. So what I've found with this is if we scale this up, the scale of this light will actually matter for shadow information. So if it's smaller, you're going to get really nice, clean, kind of crisp shadows, and if you scale this up really large like this, your shadows really soften out. So depending on what that look is that you're going for, the scale is going to matter quite a bit. If I double click on the move tool, if I take it off world, I can put this on object, and I can move this around as this plane like this, and if I rotate, I'll just tap E, I can rotate like this and kind of give this a direction. I'm going to close that up real quick here. So what I like to do, I'm going to tap 7 and turn on lighting, and you can see it's not going to look like anything's going on, just because if we hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor, and yours might be over here in a tab, I like to pull the attribute editor out and then just have this floating like this. I'm going to put the exposure to 1 for this light, and then after that, the intensity, we're going to need a pretty high intensity. So I'm going to do something like 5,000 right around there just to get something started and make sure I can actually take a look at this and see this. So what I like to do with the shading, I like to get what is called coarse shading going down through the model. And so I think I'm going to pull this forward just a little bit more like this and then rotate this back at this point. We're not going to see any lighting off to the other side of this because we've only got this one light, but we're going to be using an image-based lighting setup to actually simulate the bounce light that we have on there. So first step is just getting this light kind of in this position like this. Now we can turn on shadow information if we go to lighting and say shadows like this. And let's just go ahead and take this and then pull this back a little bit like this, and I think that's going to look pretty good. Okay, so once this is set up, I'm going to go to the next light that we're going to make, and we're going to go to Arnold, and I'm going to go to Lights, and then I'm going to go to Skydome Light. And that's going to fill the entire world with just this white color, because what we've got going on here, as soon as we create it, it's just going to put this color white. We're going to want to map that to an actual file. So let's click the mapping icon that you see here, and then we're going to use a file, because we're going to get an image-based lighting setup. So I'm not going to name it yet. I'm just going to wait and kind of grab this. If I go ahead and take this and then go to find an image, if you use the prototyping pack that I gave, if you look under the folder HDR, there's actually a file from the Epic's games engine, and you can find that. You can find other HDRI files, probably some free ones on the internet. There's all kinds of possibilities for grabbing that. If you have access to Substance Painter, if you look within their folder structure that they've got within their files that get stored on your computer, there's actually a bunch of image-based lighting setups that you see on their HDRI files, and you can grab those from there too. So I'm just going to hit open for that, and you can see it's going to be pretty bright, and you're also going to be able to see this sphere that it sets up for the lighting scenario. I'm going to take that and just scale it up a bit, so I think I'm going to put that as a scale of 4, so we can just click here and hold down shift and click, and that'll let us type in a value for all of those. I think a value for this that I found was pretty good. If we take the intensity and put it at least 0.1 at the very start of this, it'll fill things up. The other thing I want to kind of point out is what we're seeing inside of the Viewport 2.0 is not going to be very accurate for what we're actually rendering in Arnold. This is just going to give us a preview. So this will just give us a preview that we can get an approximation on things. And then once we start rendering, we'll take a look at how we can update some of these values and kind of tweak this out a little bit. So the other thing we can do for the rim light that sits back within the back of this object, we could take the area light that we have, make it a lot smaller, duplicate it, and move it off to the side. That is a possibility, but what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use one of Maya's lights, and if we go to create, we go to lights, and we go to point light, we can create a point light within Maya. And I'm going to push this over and raise this up just like this and pull it off to the side. Now, to get this to work with Arnold correctly, with the correct kind of fall off on this, if we hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor for this, we want to set our decay rate from no decay, which will just be infinite and go on forever. We'll put this and set that to quadratic. So it's going to have a very fast fall off rate that you see here. And then we need to take our intensity and probably set this up to something pretty high, like maybe 2000 or so, like that. And if you want to give it some kind of color, if we start to tint it towards a color, you're not going to introduce too much saturation within your color that you have here. So something like that might work for us. And then we can take this and we can push this in the back of the object. Depending on how we're going to kind of frame this up, that's going to determine the location of where we want this light to actually be within through here. So something else that I wanted to do on here, if I go to the Arnold tab of this light, I can tell it to either cast shadows. If we cast shadows, it will actually get occluded by some of the parts over here, and I think that was probably one of the more desirable things. And I noticed with this shadow density, we'll take a look at this whenever we start to kind of play around with the values in here when we start to render. This turned the shadow information from being super crisp, and it kind of softened that up. So I was really kind of liking some of the results of that. So we'll look at that in a little bit. I might take the exposure of this and just put this at 1. And then the last thing I want for this is light linking. So we're not going to be able to see this in the Viewport 2.0, which is kind of I wish we could actually preview this in here, but we just can't. But this is going to help us out at render time. So what we can do, we can go to Windows and we can go to Relationship Editors, and then we can go to Light Linking, and we'll do Light Centric, and this will open up a tool for us that will allow us to select any of our lights, and we can say what this light affects. So right now, all of our lights are affecting all the different objects that we have within the scene. I don't want this point light to actually affect the floor, because if I drag this down, you can see what happens, and it gets really hot, and I just don't want it to really affect the floor. I want it to just affect just this object that we have here. So if I don't want this light to affect the floor anymore, I can just click on it, and you can see it deselects it like that. Now if we click both of them, it's going to deselect from everything. So I think you get the point, but that's a kind of handy tool whenever you're dealing with some of the lighting issues like this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up here, and then the next thing that I might do is create a camera for myself. So I'll keep this perspective camera and use that as the main working camera, and then I'll just duplicate it, hit Control D, and then this will be my render camera. So I like to just put an underscore render underscore 001 like this, and if I want to make multiple render cameras, I can do that. The other thing I like to do is kind of organize everything, so I'm just going to hold down Control, select these, hit Control G, and then call this my cameras like this, and I want to select all my lights, so I'm going to select this, hold down Shift Select, hold down, hit Control G to group these, and I'll just call this lights. And I'll select my geometry, select this, hold down Shift to select it, hit Control G, and I'll group that and call this Geo. So just little things to keep everything kind of organized. And now with that secondary camera, I'm going to click and middle mouse drag this into the scene, and so I'm using this as my camera. Let's go ahead and set up what our dimensions are going to be for actually rendering. So if we go here to the render settings window, we can go here and we can set up this presets like what you see here, and there's some different custom settings that you see here. I'm going to put this on, let's see if we've got letter, we've got tabloid, and let's just do that, and we'll do an aspect ratio of this within through here. And so what I actually want to do, this is going to be an aspect ratio for like paper 11 by 17 this direction. So I'm just going to copy this number and paste it down here and do this one. And I'm going to take it off maintain width and height like that. And now I'll turn that on. I just want this to be a vertical format, so I just am flipping those numbers like that. And this should be 11 by 17 and be a resolution of 300 pixels per inch for that. So that's a pretty decent sized render that we've got going on there. So I'm going to close this down, and then within here I'm going to say view, and I'm going to do camera settings, and I'll put on resolution gate. And it's going to look a little bit funky just because it's not filling the frame the way that I want. So we'll go back to view, camera settings, and then I'll do, instead of horizontal, I'll do a vertical like this. And then now that gives us the nice vertical layout. What I would also like is a little bit more screen real estate for this. So I can go to view, camera settings, and then we've got this area within through here, and yeah, so we'll do vertical. Now if I select my camera and hit Control A for this, this is actually what I was looking for. Within the settings within here, there should be a setting within here to do overscan right here, display options. So if we do this and we set this to 0.05, something like that, it's going to fill the frame up a little bit larger. So it's not a huge change, but it's going to be a little bit nicer for us to look at in the viewport here. We also have this gate mask, so you can see there's an opacity for that. So if you want to drop that down, if you want to change the color or opacity of that, you got some some ability to do that as well. So I think this is going to give us a pretty decent look for the initial first part of us trying to render. So let's go ahead, and you probably want to save the scene file at this point. After you've saved, go into Arnold and open up the Arnold renderer. That's going to open this up, and it's probably going to start rendering for us. And it's going to be a pretty large image. I'm going to stop this immediately. While we're kind of tweaking and tuning some of the values on this thing, I don't want such a large image. So we're going to go to View, and there's Test Resolution. And you can change the test resolution to something a lot smaller. I'll do 25%. And then we can click the play button again. I'll tap 1:1, and you can see what we're working with at that point. Some options that I like to see while it's doing the rendering calculations for this is I like to actually see this show render tiles, so it kind of highlights where it's actually doing the latest calculations. And so it's going to go through, and it does a pass, and it's kind of noisy, and you can see as it goes on and it takes a little bit longer, it starts to refine this up quite a bit. So here's where we can start really playing with the different values, like our point light, and we can kind of pull that forward a bit more, and you can see pretty quickly what the values really are. And I'll hit Control A for this, and we can maybe set this off to the side over here. And then if we want to go to the values of this, maybe we start to raise this up, and you can hit that pretty quickly and start to get like I said, a better understanding of what these values actually really are. So this approximation should be probably enough to get you kind of moving and get you started on that. And so I'm just going to pull this maybe a little bit more forward, and you can see it should start to hit over within this area. I'll make this quite a bit stronger. Let's pull this up to something right in there with that area, just to make it really apparent. And what I was saying within this Arnold tab is that we've got this shadow density, and if we drag this to the left, you can see it kind of starts to thin that out a bit like that. So I'm just going to click 1:1 on that. I accidentally did the scroll wheel, so that'll zoom in and out for you there. So the next thing I want to do is, this is just a Lambert material, and I don't think it's the best material for kind of showing off the model. So I'll go ahead and select the model that we see here, and we'll right click on here, and we'll say Assign New Material. And I'm going to go to the Arnold area, and then we'll do an AI Standard Surface. And this is kind of a really nice Uber shader that has a whole lot going on for it. We're going to take the color immediately. I'm going to take it from white, and I'll put this on a mid-gray, so we can take the value and put that at 0.5, just like that. And then the specular, the roughness, I think that's a bit rough, or a bit too shiny or too glossy for me, so I'm going to do 0.45 within there. And then you can see what the IOR setting on here we've got is, if we put this down to something like 1, it starts to push the specularity only to the outer edges, and that might be even a little bit tough to see in there. As we get closer to that 1.5, it starts to fill in the entire object. So if we do even 1.6 or so, we start to get a much tighter and hotter kind of specular that we've got going on there. Now, if I don't like the specular results that's going on for our rim light, we can take the point light that we have here, and we can actually tell it to not emit specular. And if we do that and turn that off, that might reduce some of the specular that's kind of going on with that rim light. The other thing for our fill light, or I'm sorry, our bounce light that we've got going on, if I take the exposure, I'm just going to put the exposure to 1 on that. And then we've got our intensity. Now we can knock that back to 0.0, let's just do 0.05, and then knock that back a little bit. So you can see it darkens up the background quite a bit for that. And I think that's looking pretty good. Another thing that I think makes the quality of things look a lot better is if we went to this, we've got the possibility to go to render, and we go to debug shading, and we could do a lot of different passes on here. If we did something like object, we can do this, and this just gives you these different colors for the different objects. That comes in handy. The other thing that we could do is occlusion. If we took a look at that, this gives us really nice ambient occlusion renders. So it'd be nice to get that in combination with what we've got going on with our Beauty Pass render. So you could save this out, you could comp that together inside of Photoshop. So that's a possibility for you. But if you want it to render all the way together all at the same time, I'll put this on disabled for this. I'm just going to pause this for just a second. And then I'm going to open up the Hypershade right here. And let's go ahead and take the AI standard node, and then we'll graph it right here like that. And then I'm going to go to the Arnold area, and you can see there's an ambient occlusion within here. So I can just click and drag, actually just click it and it's going to go in here. I can drag these out and rearrange these and maneuver them a little bit like this. So it is possible for me to take out from here. If I open this up, I can just do the out color R. I really want to take this weight for this base that you see here, and if I do this, I'm going to replace the weight for this, because if we were to drag this all the way down, I'll just re-render this again. You can see what would happen. We get this really kind of darkening effect on here. So the default for that is 0.8. So knowing that, if we go to the ambient occlusion node and we go to the blackest black for that, and then the whitest white for this, and we set the white end of this to 0.8, we could take the ambient occlusion and then plug it into this this area that we see for this weight. So the weird thing is, it actually sits within this base area. Now that's looking for a value from like 0 to 1, and if we do RGB, that's going to have to be converted over to a luminance or something else. But what we could do with this is just open up this out color and then just take one of the channels. So we'll just take the red channel and then pipe it into the base that you see within here. And so then now we are rendering and we're getting the ambient occlusion, and it's actually driving the weight of this material that you see within here like this. So there's other things that we could do that we could kind of push on for this. If you wanted to go to subsurface and you wanted to kind of play around with that, it's possible that you could play with a potential color on this for things. It's really kind of up to you if you want to try some of these techniques and stuff like that. Now, if you start doing things like subsurface scattering, it is going to increase your render times significantly. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind for that. If you don't want to render with that, you can drag this all the way down through here. The other thing that I kind of want to talk about is the quality settings. So you could get pretty deep into this, but let's just go here, and you can see that the camera settings, the anti-aliasing that you see within here, any one of these numbers that you pull up, I would only do it 1 digit at a time. There's definitely some literature out there to figure out rendering with AOVs and figuring out which particular part of the render is actually producing the most noise, because the goal is to get this to render as fast as you possibly can without having a lot of noise within the image. Now I think what I've seen from the render tests that I've been doing, just even pumping this up to 4 and having everything else set to the default, seems to do a really nice job. So after you've kind of tweaked everything, maybe I might just take the area light and what I was telling you about the soft shadows. If we drag down this size of this, maybe we can get a little bit tighter shadows for that. And if I hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor, and I'm going to pull this back down, and then maybe I want this to be a bit more intense. Maybe that's a little bit too high. So when you find a really good setting that you're pretty happy with, it's going to be pretty easy for you to just save this scene, save the settings, and then pull new models into this and get new renders from this. The other thing that we could potentially do is with our camera, if you want to save this out on the timeline, you can just select Translate X, hold down Shift, and go down to Rotate X like this, and then just right click in here and say Key Selected, And if I want to store that as a camera position, I can just do that way. I can take it to frame 10 like this, and then at that point I can kind of rotate. So it's pretty cool how this thing is updating, kind of, you'd say in real time, but it's updating on the fly as we kind of move this thing off like this. And so I'm just going to right click and say key selected for this as well. And then now I've got myself another camera position. I'll put this at 20, and I'll just push this off to the side here like this. And then I will right click and say key selected for that. And then if everything is good and you're ready to go, all you're going to need to do is go to this view, go to test resolution, put this back at 100%. You might have to stop it and then re-render, but after that, just let it go ahead and render out. And then what I'm doing at that point is say, go to File, Save Image, and giving it a name, and then typing .exr at the end of it to save it as an EXR file. Let me go ahead and pause this real quick, and then we can hop on over to Photoshop and take a look at opening those files in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to just say File. I've already opened this before, so I'll just say File, Open, Recent, and after you've saved that file out with the .exr extension, go ahead and open it up, and it's going to ask you if you want to open this, and we'll just say as alpha channel, and I'll say OK for this. So it should open the image, and it should have the same settings as what you saw inside of Maya. And if we hold on Control and Alt and click the plus button, we can zoom in on this so you can see this is 100%. Again, if you need to get better rendering quality than this, then you're going to have to up your samples, but it is going to take a bit longer for you to render this thing out. So I just hit Control 0 to zoom out like this. The other thing is this is going to be in 32-bit, so we're going to go to image mode, and I'm going to put this into 16 bits so I can work with things. And it's saying my scratch disk is full. So sorry about that, just had to repoint that in a different direction. So I'm going to go to image mode and then put this at 16 bits. And you can see that's going to do quite a big change with the defaults there. And if I just take this and put this on exposure and gamma, it should give me the results that I had before. And then now at that point, then I should have all the different filters and all the different processes that I'm used to working with inside of Photoshop there. We kind of looked at this in class, but just thought it'd be kind of interesting to point out some of the different filter types that we kind of looked at. So we can go to image, and we can go to adjust, and there was posterize, and then we could do different levels on there if you wanted to get this to look more like a cell shaded kind of thing, depending on how many iterations you put on there for that. There was also image adjustment, and then we could do threshold. So you could drag through the image and find different slices and build these black and white images that you see here. And I was taking those and copying them and pasting them into mask with solid colors, and then we were getting different slices like this and doing a solid color slice like this, slice like this or so, and then we could do different colors on that stuff. So if you want to do something like that and thought that was kind of interesting. And the other thing is to get line work, we can go to filter, and then we can go to stylize, and we can do find edges, and that will find the different edges within the thing here. If you wanted to use adjustment layers, you could make a new adjustment layer for levels or hit Control L to bring that up. And then within there, we could tweak this out, maybe take this bright in like this a little bit, and maybe we're going to make the darker darks a little bit darker for this, and then we could use this as a multiply. Now if you wanted to get rid of color information, you could go and do a hue saturation adjustment layer, and then on this one you would just take the saturation and then drag it all the way down, kind of like that, what we see here. So it's going to hit undo and get us back to where we're at. But this is basically a way that you can set up really nice high quality renders inside of Maya using Arnold and get a basic 3-point light setup. And once you've got this set, you should be in a position to show off your models and some of your other projects that you have in a really high quality way.